Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to remind you that in the noise and chaos of life, there is a still, small voice speaking directly to your heart. That voice belongs to God, guiding you, loving you, and calling you toward your purpose. God speaks in whispers to draw us closer to Him. Throughout the scriptures, we see evidence of God choosing to communicate in subtle, quiet ways rather than with thunderous displays of power. He doesn't often shout to get our attention. Instead, He gently nudges, softly speaks, and whispers to our hearts. This method is intentional because it requires us to lean in, to pause, and to tune out the distractions of life. His whispers are personal and intimate, designed to create a deeper connection between Him and us. Think about the story of Elijah in the Bible. After facing great challenges and feeling overwhelmed, Elijah sought God on the mountain. There he experienced a powerful windstorm, an earthquake, and a fire, but God was not in any of those dramatic events. Instead, God came in a still, small voice. That whisper was enough to bring clarity, comfort, and direction to Elijah. God didn't need to use loud, overwhelming tactics to get His point across. His whisper was deliberate because it required Elijah to focus, listen, and lean into His presence. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to miss these whispers. We live in an age of constant noise, phones buzzing, emails dinging, and responsibilities pulling us in countless directions. This barrage of noise often drowns out the still, small voice of God, but He doesn't compete with the chaos. Instead, He waits patiently for us to quiet our hearts and tune into Him. His whispers are a reminder that He is close, that He knows us intimately, and that He speaks in ways that resonate deeply within us. God's whispers also require trust. When He speaks softly, it may not always be clear at first. We might wish for a billboard-sized sign or a booming voice telling us exactly what to do. But the whisper invites us to walk by faith, not by sight. It challenges us to trust that even if we can't hear Him in the way we expect, He is still guiding us. It's in these quiet moments that our relationship with Him grows stronger because we learn to depend on Him more fully. Sometimes God whispers because He knows it's what we need. A loud voice might overwhelm us or push us away, but a whisper draws us closer, requiring us to lean in and pay attention. This act of leaning in allows us to block out distractions and focus solely on Him. It creates an environment of intimacy where we can truly hear His heart. In those moments, we're reminded that God is not distant or detached. He's personal, caring, and deeply invested in every detail of our lives. The beauty of God's whisper is that it's not reserved for special moments or super spiritual people. He whispers to all of us, whether we're on the mountaintop or in the valley. Sometimes His whisper comes through scripture, a song, or the encouraging words of a friend. Other times, it's a quiet prompting in our spirit, a sense of peace about a decision, or a sudden awareness of His presence. Regardless of how it comes, the key is being willing to listen and respond. Listening to God's whisper requires intentionality. It means creating space in our busy lives to be still before Him. It might look like starting the day with a few moments of silence, setting aside time to pray and meditate on His word, or simply pausing throughout the day to ask, God, what are you saying to me right now? When we cultivate this habit of listening, we begin to recognize His voice more clearly. Over time, His whispers become a source of strength, direction, and reassurance. There's a certain vulnerability that comes with listening to God's whisper. It requires us to quiet our own thoughts, desires, and plans and long enough to truly hear Him. It challenges us to surrender control and trust that His ways are higher than ours. But in that surrender, we discover a God who is faithful, loving, and always present. His whispers remind us that we are never alone, that He sees us, and that He is actively working in our lives, even when we can't see the full picture. God speaks in whispers to draw us closer to Him because He values relationship over ritual. He's not just interested in us checking off a list of spiritual activities. He wants our hearts, our attention, and our willingness to seek Him. His whispers are an invitation to step away from the noise of the world and into the peace of His presence. They are a reminder that He is near, that He cares, and that His voice is always worth listening to. When life gets loud, stillness is the key to hearing His voice. In the whirlwind of our daily lives, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the constant noise surrounding us. Our world is full of distractions, phones ringing, emails pinging, deadlines looming, and endless to-do lists demanding our attention. Amid this cacophony, the voice of God can seem distant or even silent. But the truth is, He is always speaking. We just need to position ourselves to listen. That positioning often requires us to embrace stillness, a state of quiet surrender where His voice becomes clear. Stillness is not simply about the absence of activity. It's an intentional pause, a deliberate act of setting aside time to connect with God. In this space, we let go of our striving, our worries, and our need for control. It's in these moments of quiet that we create room for God's whispers to reach us. The noise of life doesn't just come from the external world. It also arises from within. Our minds race with thoughts, concerns, and fears, creating an inner dialogue that can be just as loud as any external commotion. Stillness helps us quiet the inner noise, allowing us to tune into the frequency of God's voice. Jesus himself modeled the importance of stillness. Throughout his ministry, we see moments where he withdrew from the crowds to pray and commune with the Father. Even though he was surrounded by people constantly seeking his attention, he made it a priority to step away and find solitude. These times of stillness were not wasted. They were essential for his spiritual renewal and clarity of purpose. If Jesus, who had such a demanding mission, needed moments of quiet with God, how much more do we? Stillness allows us to reset our perspective. In the hustle of life, we can become consumed by our own plans, problems, and pursuits. Our focus shifts to what we think we need to accomplish, and we lose sight of God's greater plan. But when we pause and become still, we realign our hearts with his. It's in the quiet that we begin to see things from his perspective. We're reminded that he is in control, that his timing is perfect, and that his plans are far greater than anything we could imagine. In the Bible, Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." This verse is not just a suggestion, it's an invitation. It's a call to step away from the chaos and remember who God is. When we are still, we allow his presence to fill the space that worry, doubt, and busyness have occupied. It's in these moments that we experience his peace, the kind of peace that transcends all understanding. This peace doesn't mean that our circumstances suddenly change, but it does mean that our hearts are anchored in the assurance of his presence. Stillness also teaches us patience. In our fast-paced culture, we've grown accustomed to instant gratification. We want answers, solutions, and breakthroughs on our timeline. But God often operates differently. He speaks in his own time and in his own way. Stillness helps us wait on him, trusting that his silence is not absence but preparation. In the quiet, he is working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances and preparing us for what's ahead. In stillness, we also become more aware of his presence. It's easy to overlook the ways God is speaking when we're caught up in the rush of life. But when we slow down, we start to notice his fingerprints everywhere in the beauty of creation, in the kindness of others, and in the subtle ways he nudges our hearts. Stillness opens our eyes to these moments, reminding us that God is always near, always speaking, and always working for our good. Creating stillness in our lives doesn't mean abandoning our responsibilities or isolating ourselves. It means finding intentional moments throughout our day to pause and listen. This could be in the early morning before the world wakes up, during a quiet walk in nature, or even in the car on the way to work. The setting isn't as important as the posture of our hearts. What matters is our willingness to set aside the noise and make room for God's voice. When life gets loud, stillness becomes a spiritual discipline, a practice that requires effort and consistency. It's not always easy to carve out time for quiet in the midst of our busy schedules, but the reward is immeasurable. In the stillness, we hear his whispers of love, guidance, and assurance. We gain clarity about our next steps and confidence in his plans for our lives. God's whispers often lead to unexpected blessings and breakthroughs. When he speaks to us in those quiet, subtle ways, it's not just to comfort us or provide reassurance. His whispers carry purpose, direction, and promises that have the power to transform our lives in ways we may not anticipate. The beauty of God's communication lies in its mystery. What starts as a gentle nudge or a faint whisper often unfolds into something far greater than we could have imagined. Throughout Scripture, we see how God's whispers led people to blessings they never expected. Consider Abraham, who was called by God to leave his homeland and go to a place he did not know. That calling didn't come with a detailed map or a grand announcement. It was a simple command, a whisper of direction. Abraham's willingness to follow that whisper opened the door to blessings so immense that he became the father of many nations. God's whisper to Abraham wasn't just about leaving, it was about stepping into a destiny that only obedience could unlock. God's whispers often challenge our comfort zones. He might nudge us towards something that feels unfamiliar or even risky. But in those moments, his guidance is leading us toward blessings we can't yet see. Take the story of Moses, for example. God spoke to Moses through the burning bush, calling him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. That whisper of purpose came with fear and uncertainty for Moses. Yet, as he obeyed, what followed was one of the greatest breakthroughs in history, the deliverance of an entire nation. Sometimes God's whispers come in the form of seemingly small instructions. He might prompt us to reach out to someone, take a step of faith in our career, or pursue a new opportunity. At first glance, these whispers might not seem significant. But when we act on them, they often lead to doors opening that we didn't even know existed. The unexpected blessings aren't always material. They might come in the form of peace, restored relationships, or clarity about our purpose. God's whispers are not limited to big life-changing moments. They are present in the ordinary, everyday decisions we make. It could be a feeling in your heart to forgive someone who hurt you, to be generous towards someone in need, or to pursue something that aligns with your values. These small acts of obedience to His whisper often lead to ripple effects of blessings that extend beyond what we can comprehend. What may feel like a small step of faith to us could be the beginning of a breakthrough orchestrated by God. The unexpected nature of God's blessings is part of what makes them so powerful. He doesn't always show us the full picture because He wants us to walk by faith and not by sight. When we trust His whispers, even without understanding the outcome, we position ourselves to receive His best. This trust builds our character and deepens our relationship with Him. It shifts our focus from what we want to what He has planned, which is always better than anything we could have envisioned for ourselves. God's whispers also have a way of aligning us with His timing. There are moments when we may feel stuck or uncertain, wondering why things aren't moving forward. But then a whisper from Him comes, a gentle prompting to wait, to prepare, or to step out. When we follow that leading, we often find that the blessing comes at just the right time. His whispers are not only about direction, they are about positioning us for breakthroughs that come in His perfect timing. One of the remarkable aspects of God's whispers is how they prepare us for what's ahead. Even when we don't see immediate results, His guidance equips us for future blessings. For example, David was anointed as king long before he ever stepped onto the throne. In the years that followed, God's whispers guided him through challenges, trials, and moments of growth. Each whisper, though subtle, was a step toward the fulfillment of God's promise. The unexpected blessing of his kingship came after years of preparation that began with listening to God's quiet voice. There's also a sense of intimacy in the way God whispers blessings into our lives. When He speaks, it's not just about giving us what we need, but about drawing us closer to Him in the process. His whispers remind us of His presence, His care, and His desire for us to rely on Him. The blessings that follow are not just gifts, they are expressions of His love and faithfulness. They remind us that He sees us, knows us, and is actively working for our good. God's whispers often lead us to unexpected blessings and breakthroughs because they come from a perspective far greater than our own. While we may focus on what's in front of us, He sees the entire picture. His guidance might take us on a path we didn't plan for or understand, but that path always leads to something greater. His whispers are an invitation to trust, to obey, and to step into the abundant life He has prepared for us. Obedience to His gentle nudges brings peace beyond understanding. When God whispers to our hearts, it's often in subtle, almost imperceptible ways of quiet prompting, a feeling in our spirit, or a moment of clarity. These gentle nudges may seem small, but they carry profound significance. They are an invitation to step into alignment with His will, and when we respond in obedience, we experience a peace that surpasses anything the world can offer. Obedience to God's whispers often requires faith. His nudges may not come with a full explanation or a clear picture of what lies ahead. He may simply ask us to trust Him, to take a step forward without knowing what the outcome will be. This kind of obedience can feel uncomfortable because it challenges our desire for control. Yet it is in this place of surrender that we discover a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. It's a peace rooted in knowing that we are walking in step with His plan, even when we don't fully understand it. There's a unique kind of reassurance that comes from knowing we've followed God's leading. When we respond to His gentle nudges, we align ourselves with His purpose, and that alignment brings a sense of calm that cannot be shaken. Even if the path ahead seems uncertain or difficult, there is a deep, unshakable peace in knowing that we are exactly where we're supposed to be. This peace is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of His guidance and strength in the midst of them. Obedience also brings clarity. Sometimes God's nudges are His way of steering us away from potential harm or leading us toward a better opportunity. We may not see it at the moment, but as we take steps of obedience, the path begins to unfold, and we realize that His guidance was protecting us, redirecting us, or preparing us for something greater. Each step of obedience brings us closer to the fullness of His plan, and with each step, our confidence in His voice grows stronger. There are times when God's nudges ask us to let go of something we're holding on to too tightly. It could be a fear, a relationship, a dream, or even a way of thinking that no longer serves His purpose for our lives. Letting go can be difficult, but when we release our grip and obey His leading, we make room for His peace to fill our hearts. That peace comes from trusting that His plans are good, that He sees the bigger picture, and that He is always working for our good. God's nudges are often an invitation to grow. They may challenge us to step out of our comfort zones, to face our fears, or to take on something we feel unprepared for. In those moments, obedience becomes an act of faith, a declaration that we trust Him more than we trust our own abilities. And as we step out in obedience, we find that His peace meets us there, calming our doubts and reminding us that we are not alone. His peace is a testament to His presence. a reminder that he goes before us and walks with us every step of the way. Obedience to his gentle nudges also deepens our relationship with him. Each time we listen and respond to his voice, we draw closer to him. We begin to recognize his whispers more clearly, and our trust in his faithfulness grows. This closeness brings a peace that is unshakable because it is rooted in the assurance of his love and his good intentions for us. It's a peace that says, even if I don't understand, I know that God does, and that's enough. The peace that comes from obedience is not always immediate, but it is always present. There may be moments of doubt or struggle as we take those steps of faith, but as we continue to walk in obedience, we find that his peace becomes a constant companion. It steadies us in the face of uncertainty, strengthens us in the midst of challenges, and reassures us when the road ahead feels unclear. It is a peace that transcends circumstances because it is grounded in the unchanging character of God. Obedience to God's nudges is often a journey rather than a single moment. It's a series of small steps, each one building on the last, leading us closer to his purpose for our lives. With each step, we experience more of his peace, and that peace becomes a guiding force, helping us navigate the complexities of life with confidence and grace. It's a peace that anchors us, reminding us that no matter what we face, we are held securely in his hands. This peace is unlike anything the world can offer. It doesn't come from success, material possessions, or even the resolution of our problems. It comes from a deep, abiding trust in the one who knows us, loves us, and leads us with perfect wisdom. It's a peace that can't be explained or replicated. A peace that comes from knowing we are walking in obedience to his voice and resting in his care. Sometimes the whisper is a reminder to trust his timing and plan. Life has a way of presenting us with situations where waiting feels unbearable. We want answers now, resolutions immediately, and breakthroughs without delay. But God often works differently. His timing is perfect and his plans are far greater than anything we could orchestrate ourselves. When he whispers to our hearts, it's often a gentle reminder to let go of our timelines and trust that his way is not only better, but exactly what we need. Trusting God's timing requires patience, and patience is not something that comes naturally to most of us. We live in a world that values instant gratification, where waiting can feel like a waste of time. But God doesn't operate on human schedules. He sees the beginning from the end and knows what needs to happen in between to prepare us for the blessings he has in store. His whispers remind us to trust the process, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Often the waiting season is not a delay, but a time of preparation, growth, and alignment. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. As a young man, Joseph received dreams from God about his future. But those dreams didn't come to fruition overnight. Instead, Joseph faced years of trials, betrayal by his brothers, slavery, imprisonment before he stepped into the position God had planned for him. Through it all, God was working behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail. Joseph's journey reminds us that trusting God's timing isn't just about waiting. It's about believing that he is faithful and that his promises will come to pass in his perfect time. God's whispers also remind us that his plans often differ from our own. We may have a vision for our lives, but his plans are always better. Sometimes we hold on tightly to our own ideas of how things should unfold, and in doing so, we miss the beauty of what he is doing. His gentle nudges encourage us to release our grip on our own agendas and embrace his will. Trusting his timing means surrendering the need to control every outcome and believing that he knows what's best even when we don't understand. One of the reasons it's so important to trust God's timing is that he sees what we cannot. He knows what lies ahead and what needs to happen before we reach the next chapter of our lives. His whispers guide us step by step, ensuring that we are prepared for what's to come. If we rush ahead of his plan, we risk stepping into something we're not ready for. But when we wait on him, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that we are walking in alignment with his perfect will. There's a peace that comes with trusting God's timing, even in the midst of uncertainty. When we let go of the need to force things to happen and instead lean into his whispers, we find rest for our souls. That rest doesn't mean we stop working or pursuing our goals. It means we do so with the assurance that he is in control. His timing allows us to live without the constant pressure of striving, knowing that he is orchestrating everything for our good. Trusting God's timing also requires faith, especially when we face delays or detours. It's easy to feel discouraged when things don't happen as quickly as we hoped, or when the path takes an unexpected turn. But his whispers remind us that delays are not denials. What may feel like a setback is often a step for something greater. His plan's always unfolding, even when we can't see it. Faith allows us to hold on to his promises, trusting that he is working all things together for our good. God's timing is also about his glory. When we trust him and allow his plan to unfold in his way, he receives the honor and praise. Often his timing results in outcomes that we could never have achieved on our own. These moments become testimonies of his faithfulness, showcasing his power and love to those around us. By trusting his whispers, we not only experience his blessings, but also become a light to others, pointing them to his goodness. Waiting on God's timing is not passive, it's active trust. It's continuing to pray, seek his guidance, and take steps of faith, even when the answers aren't immediate. His whispers often encourage us to stay the course, to remain faithful in the small things, and to trust that he is working behind the scenes. Each act of obedience, no matter how small, is a declaration of our trust in him. God's timing and plans are not always easy to understand, but they are always perfect. His whispers remind us that he is never late and never early, but always right on time. By trusting his timing, we open ourselves to his blessings, his peace, and the fulfillment of his promises in ways that exceed anything we could have imagined. The whisper calls us to act in faith, even when the path is unclear. Faith is often stepping into the unknown, trusting that God's guidance will lead us where we're meant to be. His whispers are not always loud or accompanied by signs that remove every doubt. More often than not, they come softly nudging us toward a direction, a decision, or a step that requires trust. Acting on those whispers can feel uncertain, even daunting, because they challenge us to rely on God rather than on our own understanding or resources. Faith is not the absence of fear or doubt, it's the courage to move forward despite them. When God whispers to our hearts, calling us to act, it's rarely at a time when everything feels perfect or when we feel fully equipped. He often calls us when we feel least ready, reminding us that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. Acting in faith means acknowledging that while we may not have all the answers, we trust the one who does. It's taking a step, no matter how small, knowing that he will guide the next. Consider the story of Peter walking on water. When Jesus called Peter to step out of the boat, it wasn't during calm seas, but in the middle of a storm. Logic and fear would have kept Peter in the boat, but at the sound of Jesus' voice, he stepped out in faith. For a moment, he walked on water, defying the laws of nature, simply because he trusted Jesus. The path wasn't clear, the conditions weren't ideal, but the act of faith led to a moment that demonstrated God's power and Peter's growth. God's whispers are often an invitation to participate in something greater than ourselves. They may call us to step into a new opportunity, take on a responsibility that feels beyond our capacity, or move in a direction that stretches our comfort zones. These moments are not just about the destination, they are about the transformation that occurs along the way. Acting in faith refines us, deepens our relationship with God, and reveals his strength in ways we might never experience if we stayed in our comfort zones. There are times when God's whispers lead us to take bold actions, and other times when they call us to quiet persistence. Faith is not always about grand gestures or dramatic leaps. Sometimes it's about the daily decisions to trust him in the small things. It's being faithful in the mundane, consistent in prayer, and diligent in the tasks he's placed before us. These acts of faith may seem insignificant at the moment, but they lay the foundation for the bigger things he has planned. God honors the faithfulness of those who respond to his whispers, no matter how ordinary the action may appear. When we act in faith, we often find that God has already gone ahead of us, preparing the way. His whispers are never random, they are purposeful and intentional, leading us toward his perfect plan. We may not see the entire path, but he does. Each step we take in obedience brings us closer to the fulfillment of his promises. Acting in faith doesn't eliminate challenges, but it positions us to experience his provision, his protection, his power in ways that strengthen our trust in him. Acting on God's whispers also has the power to impact those around us. When we step out in faith, our actions become a testimony of God's faithfulness. Others see his work in our lives and are encouraged to trust him in their own journeys. Our faith becomes a light, inspiring those around us to listen for his whispers and act on them. The ripple effect of one act of faith can extend far beyond what we can see, touching lives in ways we may never fully know. Faith often requires us to let go of the need for certainty. God's whispers may lead us down paths that don't make sense from a worldly perspective. They might call us to leave something behind, take a risk, or pursue a direction that others don't understand. But acting in faith means trusting that God's wisdom is higher than ours. It's believing that even when the path is unclear, his plans are good and his guidance trustworthy. There's a deep sense of peace and fulfillment that comes from acting on God's whispers. Even when the outcome is uncertain, there is joy in knowing that we are walking in obedience to him. The act of faith itself becomes a reward as it draws us closer to him and allows us to experience his presence in a profound way. His whispers are not just about what he's calling us to do. They are about who he's shaping us to become in the process. Faith is a journey, not a destination. Each time we act on God's whispers, we grow in our ability to trust him. Our faith becomes stronger, our confidence in his voice becomes clearer, and our relationship with him becomes deeper. The path may not always be clear, but the one who calls us is. Acting in faith is a declaration that we believe in his promises, trust in his character, and are willing to follow wherever he leads. In conclusion, listening to God's whisper is a profound act of faith and trust. It calls us to quiet the noise of the world, align our hearts with his voice, and take steps of obedience even when the path seems uncertain. His whispers guide us toward his perfect timing, unexpected blessings, and a peace that surpasses understanding. When we trust his gentle nudges and act in faith, we open ourselves to his greater plans, transforming our lives and the lives of those around us. Let us commit to being still, to listening, and to walking in the confidence that his whispers always lead us to his best.